Welcome to Coffee with Viking. I am Mike. Cheers. Session 3, Part 3, Session 4, Part 3, Courage Defined, Part 2. Daniel 3:18 through 30. But if not, be it known unto thee, O king, that we will not serve thy gods, nor worship the golden image which thou hast set up. Then was Nebuchadnezzar full of fury, and the form of his visage was changed against Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. Therefore he spake and commanded that they should heat the furnace 7 times more than it was wont to be heated. And he commanded the most mighty men that were in his army to bind Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, and to cast them into the burning fiery furnace. Then these men were bound in their coats, their hosen, and their hats, and their other garments, and were cast into the midst of the burning fiery furnace. Therefore, because the king's commandment was urgent, and the furnace exceeding hot, the flame of the fire slew those men that took up Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. and these 3 men, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, fell down bound into the midst of the burning fiery furnace. Then Nebuchadnezzar the king was astonished, and rose up in haste, and spake and said unto his counselors, Did not we cast 3 men bound into the midst of the fire? They answered and said unto the king, True, O king. He answered and said, Lo, I see 4 men loose walking in the midst of the fire, and they have no hurt, and the form of the 4th is like the Son of God. Then Nebuchadnezzar came near to the mouth of the burning fiery furnace, and spake and said, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, ye servants of the Most High God, come forth and come hither. Then Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego came forth of the midst of the fire, and the princes, governors, and captains, and the king's counselors, being gathered together, saw these men, upon whose bodies the fire had no power, nor was a hair of their head singed, neither were their coats changed, nor the smell of fire had passed on them. Then Nebuchadnezzar spake and said, Blessed be the God of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, who has sent his angel and delivered his servants that trusted in him, and have changed the king's word, and yielded their bodies that they might not serve nor worship any god except their own God. Therefore I make a decree that every people, nation, and language which speak anything amiss against the God of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego shall be cut in pieces, and their houses shall be made a dunghill, because there is no other God that can deliver after this sort. Then the king promoted Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego in the province of Babylon. To review Christian courage, believe God can and expects that he will, but trust him if he doesn't. We'll consider the last part of this definition today. Let's look at verse 17 and 18 again. If the God we serve exists, then he can rescue us from the furnace a blazing fire, and he can rescue us from the power of you, the king. But even if he does not rescue us, we won't. No, we want you as king to know that we will not serve your gods or worship the gold statue you set up. Verse 18 contains the most powerful words in this story and some of the most powerful in the Bible. These teenagers believed God was not only big enough to protect them from Nebuchadnezzar, but they also believed knowing him was better than anything they'd ever give up. Courage believes not only that God is bigger than the opposition, but that he is also better than all alternatives. Now here's something for you, a question for y'all to think about. Practically speaking, what does it mean for Jesus to be bigger than the opposition? What about better than any alternatives? How do these truths form a firm foundation for our courage? Christian courage trusts God if he doesn't. Sometimes you take a stand and God delivers, and sometimes you take a stand and he lets you suffer. The question you have to ask is, if he lets me go into the fire, is he enough for me? You see, the only way you'll have the courage to suffer for what is right is if you believe knowing Jesus is enough. This story proves that he is. Though 3 men were thrown in the fire, there was a 4th man in the flames. Daniel 3:25. He exclaimed, "Look, I see 4 men not tied walking around in the fire unharmed, and the 4th looks like the Son of God." Who was the 4th man, and how did he provide for their security? Well, I believe it could have been Jesus or an angel sent by God. What do you think? How does this encounter point us to Jesus? The fact that Nebuchadnezzar said it looked like the Son of God, and Jesus is the Son of God. Of course, him worshiping other gods and this being before Christ's life started, I don't know how he would have known that unless it was revealed to him through God, that the Son of Man, the Son of God, was in there with Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. There was a 4th man in the fire, and because of him, the teenagers came out of the flames totally unharmed. Though it says the man looked like a son of God, we can say in light of the New Testament that it was the Son of Day. The whole scene prefigures Jesus enduring the cross. Jesus was thrown into the fires of judgment with us, and because he was, we came through judgment totally unharmed. Therefore, there is now no condemnation for those in Christ. Romans 8:1. The hair on your heads is not singed with judgment. Our clothes are not burned. He took the flame so we could emerge in safety without a trace of judgment anywhere on our bodies or even our clothes. Only the ropes of our bondage to sin burned away. The God who died for you in the fire is the God who will sustain you in the fire. Is there a fire you're trying to get out of that God intends for you to remain in for the time being? If so, how can you depend on him to strengthen your resolve? I know staying in his word and standing strong in prayer is a good place to start. God, help me see your continued goodness to me, your ability to protect and your ability to preserve. Now, if we trust God in whatever we are going through, He will be with us like He was in that fiery furnace. We will not have to suffer alone. While we won't be spared from suffering in this life, the good news is we don't have to face our sufferings alone, because Christ is always with us. All we have to do is let Him in. And just like with Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, and Daniel also, when he was in the lion's den, God will be with us. Jesus will be there, protecting us and leading us down that narrow path to salvation. We just have to trust, put our faith in Him, and know that we are not alone, that we are truly His, and that there's nothing in this world that is bigger than Him. Even an extremely hot furnace that would consume us within seconds, a very excruciating seconds, He has the power to make us not even feel it, and to make it not even consume us. Kind of like when we are lost in our sin, He could wash us clean, showing no marks of that sin, no rope marks around our wrist and feet that are tying us to that sin. Because He will clean us up, make us whiter than snow, and lead us to a brighter future with Him in His Father's kingdom. The choice is all on us, though. It isn't what we choose today. It's in what we choose throughout this life, how we choose to live. How are you going to choose to live? I choose to serve the Lord, to give Him my everything. Stay blessed. Stay caffeinated. Much love.